It's a pleasure to have two stalwarts and two people that I look up to a lot, Nikhilesh Ghushe ji and Srinivas Mahodaya, our own in-house Shastra guide and scholar, to discuss something that's extraordinarily important that Amrit and I have been, in fact, talking about for some time, but we don't necessarily have the means yet to present an intelligent view, and therefore we've turned to scholars who are better aware on the idea that we hear about application of IKS in many areas. Of course, there's a lot of interesting and cutting edge work happening in computational linguistics. There is a lot of work happening at the cutting edge of neurobiology, bioengineering. There's a lot of work happening in computer science, particularly AI and IKS. And a lot of people who look at IKS either from within or from outside, while some of them appreciate and can intuit the relevance and the link of IKS to these areas, for vast majority who are within the disciplinary lens today, this is not probably a subject or a topic that they're familiar with. So the objective of this set of conversations is to bring home in a very sober and logical way the application part of IKS. What do we mean by IKS? Why are we intellectually convinced about its relevance? But how do we also make sure that we are responsible when we claim that perch? And how do we make sure that this is useful to people? While there is a whole paradigmatic approach that we would get into and then hone in on the specific case of artificial intelligence and IKS, and particularly the parts of IKS, because IKS is such a vast ocean. What are the specific darshanas or philosophies or shastras or elements of Indian knowledge system that tie in specifically with artificial intelligence and what we're seeing as the latest developments? We should also put a lens when we hone in on that, on the current context of AI, LLMs. We're all living in the world of GPTs. What does it mean to cognition? What does it mean to human learning? What does it mean to human meaning? And how do we actually also address some of the discoveries that we are hearing from the rest of the world? Particularly now, there's a lot of interesting debate going on whether AI is capable of reasoning, right? Whether it is hallucinating. How do you know it is hallucinating? Apple has just recently released a paper debunking a lot of claims that others have made. So there's a lot of churn happening within that world. And from our perspective, from people within the Indian knowledge system perspective, it appears that our knowledge systems, particularly Nyaya, Vaiśeṣika, Vyākaraṇa, offer a very definitive way to look at the ideas of reasoning. How does meaning evolve from word? So we wanted to put a lens on that, and that's the attempt. We envisage this as a series of conversations leading up to some kind of learning resources. Hopefully, something that will actually be capable of being presented as a course eventually. But we begin this in a very exploratory spirit and try and discover the multiple perspectives that we have available within IKS today. So I want to begin with Nikhilesh ji first. Nikhilesh ji, we've discussed this a few times in the past, and I've been a big admirer of your work and how you bring the product lens to Indian knowledge systems, and particularly in technology. But your work is also upstream. So if you could begin by giving us the paradigmatic lens itself, how should we even conceptualize when we say IKS and application, even before we get into AI and LLMs?
So I think usually when we say an applied science in the modern context, the way we learn it in colleges and current academia, the modern way of looking at it, there are certain underlying assumptions which are never questioned. We are never. The world is made up of atoms being one, right? And the things that the incentives and disincentives given to humans change their behavior. This is a basic assumption behind all managerial kind of sciences. So is there that level view, a different or a view that we have? Yes, we have. From IKS perspective, from there we can start and then come to applied. So there is a lot of in the recent last 10 years, a lot of work on overall basis of many sciences being what IKS can contribute there at the academic level. Specific to application, I think I am particularly I have thought more about computer science and management, so I can get more detailed into that. But if I have to make a overall comment on paradigm that from my whatever study I can bring is that this notion of primarily most Indian sciences will frame this as the entire reality in three parts: the pramata, the prameya, and the pramana. The one who is knowing, the thing that is being known, and the method of knowing. So most Western sciences are inside the prameya,
Yeah.
what is being known. Very few of them talk about pramata. In the West, Western psychology is one of them which talks about who the knower is a little bit, but it is not very deep in that sense. In Indian sciences, there is a lot of talk about pramata, and more focus has been there on the pramata. The most common, the most sort of super hit IKS fields are mostly about pramata, Vedanta, and all of that. And but there have been very deep areas of prameya and praman studies in IKS, which have more application than the pramatas kind of sciences. So I think Nyaya is the Pramana Shastra primarily, and Vaisheshika is the Prameya Shastra primarily. We can say that these have a lot of applications and especially in computer science and management, but otherwise also. So if I have to make a general list of it, I think physics is one thing in which is right now in the current physics is right now in trouble. There are a lot of theories which are contradicting each other, which are both of them experimentally proven, but they are not gelling with each other. That means there is some ontological problem.
Yeah.
That is one place where I think Vaiśeṣika has some contribution to make. This is a real application which is possible. Uh, I think Siddharth Kagji has
Yeah. Subhash Kagji. Yeah.
Suhash Kagji has talked about many of them. One of the books is written. Uh, uh, there is, I think, the experimental shastras related to Vaisheshika have some overlap with Raseshwar Darshan and metallurgy, the alchemy side of things which were there. That has not been explored for application is one area, I think. The second area is linguistics and logic. In Indian sciences, linguistic and logic were never separated. They were always together. Whereas in the West, logic is something which is uh, where the structure of a logical discourse is separate from the content of it. So the syllogisms, also Aristotelian logic, which is there, which is that if a statement A is true and another statement B is true, then the statement A and B is true, says nothing about the content of A and the content of B. The rules of logic are written irrespective of the content of the discourse. The structure of the discourse is what the logic deals with. And in most Indian logical sciences, which are primarily in Nyaya Vaisheshika realm, also to some degree Mimamsa and Vyākaraṇa, uh, they will never start with a content separate out from structure. Ontology is basis of epistemology. There is an ontological assumption that what is the reality,
Yeah.
which then decides how do you know. So this has the potential of creating a series of applications, a lot of applications. Well, we see that a lot of this Aristotelian logic derived logical sciences fail at dealing with human emotions, human incentives, reasons like those, but they work on material. They work on material sciences.
Yeah.
Uh, so there is a lot of structure, logic in logic and linguistics. There is a lot of contribution. That's the second area. I think the third area is governance and management, which again people primarily restrict themselves to Niti Sar and Chanakya. But there are more profound things to think about. I had a discussion with Srinivas where Nyaya has a model of Atma. Unlike Vedantins, which thinks is like Atma does not have gunas, Nyayikas hold that Atma, anything that can know, has 9 gunas: Jnana, Sukha, Dukha, Ichha, Dvesh, Prayatna, Dharma, Dharma, Sanskar. Now, when we think about, let us say, aligning uh, people in an organization, most lenses that we have come from Western logic, which treats humans as something, as you mold a material, you would mold a human being. That's not the basic ontological assumptions of Nyaya Vaisheshika is different. They say that the gunas that Atma has are different and they have a causation between them. I am not a very big expert in this. I've studied more logic and linguistics. Srinivas has some more depth on that. I think broadly these are the where we can have real application contributions. These three areas is in, I think, my mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think the link between a worldview and how a worldview is inextricably linked to cognition, language, philosophy, and metaphysics, and how that determines and in fact shapes the application downstream. It's something that is not appreciated enough. While there is foundational work at the upstream level, some of the plumbing has not happened yet. I also have, I have a perspective on this because I look at most of the problems that we have today. If I look at the macro problems, whether it is environment, whether it is immigration, whether it is war, they're all problems to a certain degree if you abstract of collaboration. How do you get different people, different nations, different cultures to collaborate? But collaboration itself is a function of learning. So we can abstract a lot of problems to problems of learning. How are humans learning? What is the best way to learn, and what is the best content to learn, which shapes the mind to collaborate. And if you look at it, that the point that you mentioned, Nikhileshji, about the threefold structure that Indian knowledge systems, particularly Nyaya, has compared to the objective way of learning, which where the Western episteme has blocked itself into. Greg Onricus, I'm reading this book and I'm very influenced by it because while it's complex and dense, I see a lot of ideas in Indian knowledge systems being represented in a new sort of way there. It's called the unified theory of knowledge. And there he talks about three ways of knowing. The first way of knowing is first person subjective, all of the emotions that you spoke about, and which is why the application of Indian knowledge systems in governance, in management, in organizational design is going to be profound because it encompasses the first person subjective experience. All of our greatest emotions, right? Joy, anxiety, love, jealousy, envy. These are real things. Whether they are measurable or replicable or generalizable is a different story, but they're true. So that is the first person subjective experience. And then he talks about the intersubjective experience or dimension of learning, that you and I have this dialogue and we construct the truth together and meaning emerges from this. Of course, in research methodologies, you can look at constructive methodology around this, but there is a learning quotient to this upstream. And then there is the objective way of learning things where the object and subject are separate. So he is trying to, what they're calling as unified theory is basically trying to encompass or fold all of these three ways of learning into one, which is actually our way of learning if you look at it from an Indian knowledge system perspective, right? All the things that you mentioned about Vedanta and things being very, very centered, where the link between the knower, the known, and the method of knowing are all intertwined and it's integral. What we call an integral learning culture is basically that. So I think there is also a meta theory of learning itself that can inform downstream application.
Yes.
Srinivasji, I wanted to get your perspective on this. Nikhilesh has given us the structure and the link between ontology and how it relates to applications. Specifically in your area, in Nyaya and Vaiśeṣika, how do you look this?
Yeah. So my whatever I see, because as I am introduced to the world, fortunately, from a Shastric lens itself. So it's like I didn't study any physics, I didn't study any mathematics, and then I came to Shastras. It was more the other way around, where I first studied Tarkasangraha, then I started seeing the world, then I started to understand the world. So therefore, my approach of knowing the world is totally different from what you people normally have. The samskara is different from me. So whenever I see, or even it could be even while watching movies or while watching series, etc., I try to identify any element that I can actually map to what I know from the Shastra. So that is where, whenever I see any technology or anything, so that is how I understand. I try to connect with those things. So coming to technology, and while I was talking to Nikhilesh ji at Ahmedabad, so it was like he was actually understanding my problem because many of times people don't understand what we try to see. So therefore, whenever I see these GPTs or whatever technology that is now which is very much prevalent, is that it is trying to mimic us. So when it is trying to mimic us, it comes from a worldview. So everyone will have a worldview. It also has a worldview. Whether that technology is built with that concept of worldview and consciously built like that or not, but over a period of time, it develops that worldview. That we see that maybe an year or year and a half back, if we ask anything related to Shastras, ChatGPT was very raw, very ignorant compared to today. Whatever I see that the ability that it has developed over a year and a half that I am seeing, it has changed a lot. But whether the technology has been built like that or not is a different thing, because I cannot comment on that. But whatever I see in AI or ML, it is more like they talk about mimicking the human intelligence. But where we have a lot of work done, and we have a lot of, and even I would like to even share that Nikhilesh ji, that we are doing now a Nitisara deep dive. So if I see that even in there, Nyaya Vaiśeṣika is relevant. When you talk about Indriya Jaya, what are Indriyas, how do Indriyas work, what is the causation, their theory, and etc. Again, you have to map it from Nyaya. And Nyaya, it's in tradition we call Nyaya to be salt. So a dish without salt is tasteless, and salt itself is of no use. So therefore, the Shastra itself is built in such a way, and it was developed in such a way that it was only there for application to in other Shastras. So the language of Nyaya Shastra is used across the Shastras. Some of the things related to the Prameya, as you said rightly, in the related to the materialistic world, the other Shastras don't delve into it, because they say that everything can be known from Vaiśeṣika and Nyaya Darshana. So therefore, you don't deal with the materialistic world much, but they deal more about the Pramata, as you rightly said, and Prameya is left out to Vaiśeṣika and Nyaya mostly. So therefore, I definitely every time have this hunch, I could say, because I cannot, claim big, because I'm not an expert in that. But definitely that there is a lot of applicability in our day-to-day life and in whatever we built, because we are addressing essentially whatever products or any technology that is built, that is built to address an individual. So an individual, and how does it actually serve any purpose to a particular individual, is about any product. So knowing the individual and knowing the whole cause relation effect or relation between what you built and how does the individual react to it, this is very much beautifully dealt in the Shastras. So therefore, mapping these and trying to extract certain frameworks from the Shastras and trying to build a product from it definitely would be the most effective method, I feel. And we are very much fortunate that people like Nikhilesh ji are working in that path, and it's really nice to see his understand his views.
Thank you. So I think just for coherence and continuity, we made three claims so far. Right? One, that upstream worldview matters, and worldview is a function of the knowledge system, and knowledge system and the truth claims or ontology that they have a direct bearing on what you would consider to be knowledge, and therefore what comes down as applications. That's one. Second claim that we made is that learning is critical, and if you look at a meta theory of learning, then a learning process or a paradigm that can encode the knower, the first person subjective, the objective, the thing that has to be observed and learned, and the process that connects the knower with the known, that is critical. And this complete set is more visible in Indian knowledge systems, and therefore it has huge relevance. And the third is the direct link between specific darshanas like Nyaya and Vaiśeṣika as a design language and grammar of learning anything, because they look at the cause and consequence relationship. And therefore, if you look at product design itself, product design, or what we call user experience or user design or user experience design today, is fundamentally about the intuitive feedback, whether it is tactile or whether it is kinetic, the feedback that a user gets when he or she interacts with the product, but that is actually built on a core architecture of link between cause and consequence. And if Nyaya and Vaiśeṣika have both the systems of that linking and also the categorization of what experience belongs where, particularly Vaiśeṣika, to me, from an outsider layman lens, appears like a very strong design language. It is actually a product pedagogy itself, because I come from product design or product development background a little bit. So when you look at Vaiśeṣika, it goes from the basic unit to actually classifying what belongs to a class, and within the class what belongs to a specificity. So it gives you a nice architecture to build your product itself. So we're making these three claims right now. Amrit, you had any thoughts at this before I go to Nikhilesh next?
Yeah, no, I think just we can build on top of this. So we're of course understanding that there is current way that Western sciences in general or even technologies are set up. I think we can also start to get into some tangibilities of, for example, even in the workings of an AI model. Let us accept for a moment that it is being built to try and mimic us, which means that it's being built to try and mimic human intelligence, human processing. But Nikhilesh ji, as you mentioned, there is Prameya, there's Pramati, and there's Praman. So what aspects of these can we plausibly try to build into AI? And what does it even mean to build them into AI? Would it have to work at, and we'll get into technicalities here, but would it have to work at the tokenizer level? Would it have to work at the transformer level? How do those things pan out?
Yeah, so I think Nikhilesh, that's a cue to you to help us get into what does AI and Nyaya, Vyākaraṇa. I think you identified 3 or 4 elements of Indian knowledge systems. Basically, you can start maybe quickly defining that and then helping us understand the link with AI and LLMs.
Yeah, the first part I talked about general more applications. I'm specifically getting into computer science and logic and linguistics and the overlap with computer science.
Yeah.
And before we get to GPT and transformer level, we need some more background to understand where particular IK sciences are applicable. I think AI starts in 1950s, before actually electronic computers came. People already started thinking about how do we tell machines something, and the algorithm development as algorithm is basically a set of steps that you can tell it to do something which is intelligent, starts in 50s, and people hit a bottleneck in 70s where there's this famous quote by a computer scientist called Dijkstra that a computer language should not just be about what a machine can do, but also as much about what a man can think, because it's a communication thing between a man and a machine. Now that is when people started thinking about programming paradigms, basically which are thinking aids for which on one side are thinking aids for humans, and on the other side are ways to translate that structured input from a human to something that a machine understands. And there are many paradigms, or 4 of them primarily: the procedural paradigm, the object-oriented paradigm, the logical or declarative paradigm, and the functional paradigm are the more commonly known programming paradigms. This is far before this. So there was this saying up until 90s that whatever starts to work, people stop calling it AI. Paradigms used to be an AI area in 70s. It became a program because it became very programmable and predictable. People stopped calling it AI. And so what happened? There were many attempts of doing these structured symbolic languages which can build knowledge and information into machines, which we can roughly call you can say it's symbolic AI, knowledge representation and symbolic AI. In 2012, something specific happened. Professor Jeffrey Hinton, created what we today call deep learning. Now, if you look at how people learn computer science, typical an IIT first year course will have something called discrete mathematics. So mathematics splits into 2 parts: a continuous maths and discrete maths. People like mechanical engineers deal with continuous maths, where vector algebra, curls and grads, fields, which is a continuous, real numbers are what are more important. And the discrete math is more about sets and sequences and logic and syllogisms, all of that. Now, computer science you have had almost nothing to do with higher end continuous maths, basically. Engineering maths was not taught to them, computer science students. They were primarily get into discrete maths. And discrete maths is is the basis of symbolic AI. In 2012, Geoffrey Hinton actually took vector-based methods, which there were attempts earlier before Geoffrey Hinton also, but not very successful, of uh, of modeling real-world things as vectors, which were called embeddings. So, for example, if you want an intelligent algorithm to scan X profiles and categorize them into similar profiles or similar tweets categorized, you will write an algorithm which will convert that profile or that tweet into a vector, and the vectors which are near to each other will be similar. This basic embedding idea and deep learning, which is basically using vector algebra for purposes of knowledge, started in 2012. And it was very successful immediately in image processing and video and sound, text to speech, speech to text. It was not very successful in natural language understanding, because there is some kind of an impedance mismatch between symbolic way, the way humans understand language and logic, and the symbolic AI based on discrete maths, and this vector based thing. In 2017, that again seminal paper happened, which is Attention is All You Need. One of the authors in an Indian. This created transformers basically, and the it is able to capture in vector terms meaning to some degree, which is different, and so there are word embeddings. For every word there is a vector. For every phrase that you construct out of a word, there is another vector. There is a sentence vector, and this allows you to sort of predict the next thing. It's very good for generation. What it has succeeded is in giving an output. But it is still if you look at fundamental math, what is the math of transformers? It is, you can say, it is a context-aware search of the right sentence, which should be the next one. Your conversation is going on, so it is kind of a search to find out what should be the next sentence. And because it is trained on so large a data, it is almost always the correct statement. But it is not applying a symbolic logic of if then else. That's why it is not able to explain why it is giving an answer. Now, the logic-based models which have now come in the last 1 year, there is some attempt to go in that direction. But yesterday you said the Apple paper. I haven't seen it in detail. I have to still read it. But that is. I had the hunch that what it will not be able to do symbolic things, and unless humans and machines have a common set of symbols which they agree on what it means, humans will never have the confidence that the machine knows it. Yeah, there will always be some probabilistic doubt that maybe it will not do correct, and that is why there will always be a human step between. So, are you right now any business giving their buying and selling decision in hands of a LLM? No. But you can give it in the hands of a trading platform, which is hard-coded program by a symbolic logic. You can say if the price reaches 450, sell my stock, right? This, you will never do this with an LLM. Why? Because you don't have the confidence, a symbolic confidence. So I think this is the context in which we should think that where can we be of help? I've spoken a lot. If you want, I can now get into Nyaya. Sounds good.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. And maybe we can take this question back just one level and say, what are the ways in which Shastra says humans make meaning? Maybe within the Nyaya and Vaiśeṣika lens. Symbol manipulation is one. Then there is word-to-word linkage and word-to-meaning linkage. Srinivas, maybe quickly an overview of the architecture of meaning itself in Nyaya and Vaiśeṣika.
So Nyaya Shastra has, over a period of time, developed something called as Shabdabodha Prakriya. So, to understand any conversation that is based on words, so there are three approaches that we see in the tradition. One is the Nyaya Shastra's approach. The second one is Vyākaraṇa's approach, and the third one is the Mīmāmsa's approach. They may be initially, they do contradict in certain places, and you do have a lot of Vada Granthas which refute the other, and all that Vada thing goes on. But the journey starts with Nyaya Shastra, where it even talks about, and of course you do have Sahitya also coming in, which again adds another flavor to it. So it starts with where does the journey of the Shabdabodha or verbal cognition happen? It's with the word, the knowledge of word, and it does ignite the knowledge of the meaning, which we call it as padartha smriti, smaranam. So in order to have this remembrance of the meaning, there needs to be a prerequisite, which is the knowledge of the relation between the meaning and the word, which we call it as vritti. So thus the relation between the word and the meaning can be of broadly two types or three types. So one is direct meaning, and the second one is the indirect meaning, which we call it as a lakshana. Shakti to be direct meaning, direct relation, and the lakshana to be the indirect one. And there is the third one, which the Sahitya Shastra comes up with, saying that, which is the Vyangya also. Vyangya also comes to be the third one. So one thing, that how do you understand that this word is having a direct relation with this meaning? So again, the Shastra comes, they say that there are 6 to 7 types of methods through which we actually understand that this particular word has this meaning. That is like Vyākaraṇa, Upamana, Kosha, Aptavakya. Shaktigraham, Vyākaraṇopamana, Koshaptavakyad, Vyavaharatashcha, Vakyasya Seshad, Vivriter Vadanti. Siddhapadam Sannidhyasya Vruddhaha. So you have different methods in our life that we make. How does actually a child actually understand that, this particular word means this? How does he understand that cow, the word cow or go, would mean a particular creature with particular features? So he only understands it by observation. How does a child actually understand that his name is so and so? How does I know that my name is Srinivas? I'm being named Srinivas, and my brother's name is something else. So it only happens to be that people are repeatedly uttering a particular word which is similar in nature many a times, pointing towards you. So therefore, by this Vruddha Vyavahara, this is called as Vruddha Vyavahara. That means the elders, they are using a particular word repetitively in a very particular context and a particular sense. So this is repetition is happening. So therefore, he makes it okay, fine. So that means whenever they utter this word, that means this. So this is one way of this, which we call it as Vruddha Vyavahara. And by Vyakarana, you do know certain meanings like the derivative meanings and etc. Until and unless you know Vyakarana, you don't know that part of it. You take it for granted. Maybe, it is a rudhi, which we call it as. Upamana, that is while you, with similarity, what is a Gavaya or something, which is similar in nature, but you tend to, how does a bull is different from a cow? So what are the similarities in it? What are the unique attributes in it, and etc. So this is how also you understand that, the relation between the word and the meaning. So therefore, this is one approach of knowing the the meanings. And obviously, you do have dictionaries, kosha. You do have dictionaries. You do have the context also. Many a times, in a particular sentence, you may know if there are 10 words. You may know the meaning of 8 words, but not of the 2 words. So if you know the meaning of the 8 words, you will somehow get a vague understanding of what the 9th and 10th word are also. They're meant. So, okay, in this context, this could mean this. So this is one way of understanding. So these are all knowing, the methods of knowing the meaning. And after that, you do have something called as lakshana, which is very dynamic in nature. Because at times, even if you take any dhatu, that is the kriya padas, that is the verbs in Sanskrit, they say that dhatu nam anekartha. So a singular verb can have multiple meanings. How do you understand those all meanings? Not that every time gachati means to go. At times gachati could mean to understand also. If you use the word ava, the prefix ava gachati would mean you understand something. So this is very dynamic in nature. So when do you understand when it is in which cases that it is direct meaning and in which cases it is indirect meaning? So again, a whole which we call it as lakshana grahakam. based on what entities or what situations that you understand that this particular word is not used in the direct meaning, but it is used in a indirect meaning. So there you have that at times the multiple meanings used in the same sentence, they are not coherent enough. They don't actually match. The meaning doesn't match. So therefore you understand that that particular word is meant in another, would mean something else. So these are certain things which are very much clearly there are very beautiful definitions given to them which are applicable across. It's like x and y's, and you can fill in x and y, what is x and what is y, and you will understand the result, that kind of a thing. And then you have other methodologies such as which we call it as akanksha, yogyata, sannidhi, and etc., which are essentially which determine the relation between multiple meanings, multiple padarthas, which will in this thing. So this is all from a Nyaya Shastra perspective, and Mimamsa adds more flavor to it. It doesn't stop with word and meaning, but it takes whole contexts together. So it takes the whole sentences. It takes a bunch of sentences and tries to analyze them. How do you actually interpret the meaning? Because Mimamsa Shastra is all about interpreting. It's the science of interpretation of the Vedic verses, right? So therefore, how do you understand? It doesn't stop with word. It goes beyond word, and it goes with sets of sentences and more. So a whole context itself can be determined. I mean, a whole maybe a mantras of maybe 50 mantras together. What is the whole broader understanding of these mantras? What is it actually telling about? So it goes until that generalization also. So these are, and obviously Vyākaraṇa comes from a very syntactical perspective. It starts with what is the prefix, what is the suffix, what is the root verb, what are all the this thing in that. And obviously it so all these three methods have three different fundamental axioms kind of an approach, where one says it is prathamanta mukhya visheshaka Shabdabodha, the Nyayikas. So they say that every sentence should have a karta. So it will have a person to which you have to relate the verb. The Vyākaraṇas, they say something which is based on the verbal meaning. So the verbal meaning will be the basis in which all the other meanings will come and relate to them. Again, in the Mimamsa, they say something, they go beyond it, and they say it's not the verbal meaning, but the outcome of a verbal meaning, which we call it as prayatna or shabdi bhavana, which they essentially call, in which everything will come and relate to it. Independently, they are not actually contradictory. It's only that a very few things they contradict between. So this is how meaning making and all, and this is very much relevant whenever you think about machine learning. It's all about learning, right? So most of the times the knowledge transmission happens through words, and this is how the Shastra actually perceives it.
No, this is
I had sorry, I just had two points to tag on to this also, and as we maybe then funnel this to Nikhilesh ji, in that context of meaning making, and especially in the context of teaching silicon how to understand or make meaning. One point also, you mentioned it in the context of Mimamsa, but even Sri Bhartrhari's theory of the Vakyapadiya, where he talks about how the full meaning actually unfolds at the end of a sentence, so not even in its constituent words. How would that reflect upon the current LLM kind of architecture, where word by word it understands or makes meanings? So is there a sense to try and think of a different way to program computers itself to approach meaning? And the other part, not just words separately, but within Sanskrit, for example, dharati, dharana, dharma, these are three seemingly different words. But if I have some intuition for the root dhatu of dhri, then I'm able to actually map these words almost in that same vector space, Nikhilesh ji, where I understand that they're close to each other in some kind of semantic meaning. So are these things that can be ported to computer programming and machine learning itself?
and while Nikhilesh gets to that, now it should also debunk this idea of Indian knowledge systems being only esoteric, and look at the pragmatism and the core logic and the depth of that logic. where each word and the connection and the context, everything is sort of looked at together. And while Srinivasji was talking about Mimamsa and to Amrit's question as well, the breakthrough that DeepSeek had seemed like an innovation which comes from potentially like a Mimamsa school, right? Which was able to circumvent the need to do word-to-word computation and parsing to try and look at expert opinions together, bunched together for meaning. So I wanted your perspective also in the context of what we're seeing emerging in LLMs. Nikhilesh.
Okay, this last part I don't think I am capable of answering, but
That's fine.
The what Amrit was asking, and Bhartrhari, I think before I get specifically answering that, I have some general comment on what Srinivasji said. He primarily took the Nyaya view, which is right, and as Amrit said that Bhartrhari would say that a sentence has a complete meaning. Nyayikas disagree. They said the padas have meanings, the words have meanings. Bhartrhari says no. In Bhartrhari's terminology, in general Vyākaraṇa's terminology, they say that meaning of a sentence is sthita lakshana, which I would roughly translate as well defined, whose lakshan is sthita. And the meanings of words are apodhara, means they have been extracted out. Pieces have been done for the sake of academic understanding. In reality, in human mind, it doesn't happen. According to Vyākaraṇas, the sentence lights up. So there is a word called sphota in the Vyakarana Darshana theory, which basically has there are 8 kinds of sphota. Pada sphota, the basically varna sphota. A particular alphabet hits and something arises. A word hits, something else arises. But these photas are understood are only there for the sake of academic understanding. Actually, only Vakya Spota is true. What happened according to Vyākaraṇas? Nyāyikas will disagree with it. Okay, but so I think this idea is very linked to. So why was Transformer successful? Is because they have something called positional encoding, which is basically there is a vectorification of the position of a word in a sentence. There is a vector. It does something with. I won't get into maths, but it does something with an input sentence which extracts out the positional significance of a word in a sentence and uses that as the input to the second stage. That this is able to work because a word plus its positional significance and the sentence together forms is needed for creating meaning. So, but eventually the stable meaning, Sthita Lakshana meaning, is of the sentence. I actually agree with it, though this Nyayikas will not agree with me, but I think so. The Nyayikas view is that famous shlok from Karikavali that Padadnyanam tu karanam dwaram tatra padarthadihi Shabdabodha phalam tatra shakti. Yeah. So the knowledge of the word is a prerequisite for Shabdabodha to happen, for comprehension of a sentence to happen. The knowledge of the word is prerequisite. Paradhyanam tu karanam. Karana is the necessary cause. Dwaram tatra padarthati. The knowledge of the meanings of the words, not the words. Knowledge of the meanings of the words is the intermediate step. Shabdabodham phalam tatra. The output is Shabdabodha. When they say Shabdabodha, they actually means the relationships between the meanings of words. All meanings of words and how they are related to each other. Kiska kisme anvay hai. What are they related to each other? That is Shabdabodha is the output and Shakti di sahakarini. Shakti is basically the meaning arising power of words. Is the helping hand, basically. This is Nyayika's view. Vyākaraṇas would say that's not true. The speakers, within the speaker, there is a meaning that arises. That through the pranamaya kosha and all the mechanism which is there in the body translates into a voice. That voice is then heard by the speaker, and in the speaker, the same thing arises which was there in the listener. The same thing arises which is there in the speaker's mind. Mind is not the right word, which was there in the speaker, which translated into the voice. And this entire process is actually called sphota. And they say that the meaning is possible because underlying both the beings is a unity. Otherwise, the communication is impossible. So from there they come to Shabda Brahma. They say that the substratum of the consciousness is word itself. What it is made up of is Shabda. That is how they connect to arising. They connect arising of meaning to consciousness, and they say that all other kinds of perception, which is sensory perception or inferential perception, all are basically a way of Shabda perception only. It is the most primal, according to Vyākaraṇas. Nyaya will disagree with me, but according to Vyākaraṇas, the most primal perception is that of the Shabda. And they link it to Onkar by saying that the first thing what was there is Onkar. That is from there they will come here.
So I see all these to be actually comprehensive and not contradictory. They're complementary also. They're complementary in nature, because many a times why do the tradition actually starts the journey with Nyaya Shastra is because for this very cause, that Nyaya Shastra starts at a very fundamental level where you can actually connect to it easily, and then lead to all these very subtle realities. So
yes.
So
I will direct.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Nikhilesh.
So I connect it to the current AI.
Yes, that's what I was getting to. Yeah.
So this Shabdabodh Prakriya that Srinivas talked about from Nyaya, there is a similar one we also mentioned about Vyākaraṇa. So this we took up, what I'm doing at my work, and we said that how can we make silicon do this basically. And there was a lot of challenge. We have now solved a lot of it, and so there are two kinds of challenges. One kind of challenge is a paradigm kind of challenge, which is basically how do you let humans tell knowledge about the world to the machine, and how can there be a new paradigm based on IKS? Our answer is yes. We call it verb centrism, verb in the center. The second kind of challenge is that once an input is in a structured symbolic input is given to a machine, what data structures does it translate to, on top of which a query can run? And so there have been so many symbolic AI attempts before 2012 which have not succeeded. So why do we think an IKS based one will succeed? And the primary reason is what I said earlier, that the Nyaya logic is basically is deeply intertwined with ontology. So we say that there are 7 kinds of meanings of words. So what we did, we took inspiration from Nyaya and Vyākaraṇa both. The paradigm inspiration came from Vyākaraṇa, the data structure came from Nyaya, and the algorithms is something we have invented because humans don't work the way silicon works. The Shabdabodh written for a human being, when I say Ramaha Gramam Gacchati, and we translate it to Ekatva Vachinna Gramanishta Sanyoga Anukula Vyapara Anukula, whatever, Kritiman Ramaha, right? So this is understood by a human, and when we have two Shabdabodhas to compare, a human intuitively knows which is broader, which is narrower, things like those, right? To tell it to machine, we had to invent an algorithm. So what we have done is we have taken Nyaya Shabdabodha, Vyākaraṇa's paradigm, including using Vyākaraṇa's paradigm, we created a language. The language translates to a data structure, which is the Nyaya Shabdabodha data structure, and on top of which there is a query algorithm we have invented, because of which an answer can be given. We are right now building it, and what I can tell it that this is a symbolic mechanism that we are doing. Whatever probabilistic things which are going on in the world of GPT, it is needed. There are many things which they are not able to do because they don't have a symbolic support. So we intend to be someone which can be a symbolic support tool to an LLM. And what I will give you one thinking direction where it can be things. So there was this guy called Alex Graves, whose famous work on differential neural networks is basically a neural network which has an external memory. So this 2017 paper, Attention is All You Need. Before 2017, attention was a mechanism on external memory. And 2017 paper got self-attention happen on the sentence itself, because of which positional encoding was invented in 17. But the idea was that a neural network, for example, a typical example of a memory-based neural network is gameplay. You're playing a first-person shooter game, and you want an AI to learn how to play the game. Now, as the first-person shooter moves through the space, it needs to remember at what XYZ was what. Was there a person standing there? Was there a wall there? So a typical first-person shooter game will learn, the AI that is learning how to play it will remember, map to an XYZ location various properties, or whether there's a wall there or things are there. And this is outside of the neural network. So why are memory-based systems not being done for NLP? The reason is, if you want to remember space, the dimensionality of space is well known, 3. And I know to have a structure in which, where do I keep a thing? There is no dimensionality of the space of meanings. It's not very well understood. That is why from a vector-based system, there is an impedance mismatch between creating a memory. I think what we are doing is helpful there. And anything in general, many IKS approaches of converting words to meanings, method. There are non-Vyākaraṇa, non-Nyāyika methods, which can be of also help. So this is a very broad answer. If you want specifics of this, I can get into it.
Yeah. No, I think it's important. It does get quite dense quite soon for the audience, like I said, and that's why it has to be a series of conversations. But the way I understood and processed what you said is like you're actually fixing the void. It does not matter what LLM is in the market today. All of them have a common problem of connecting symbolic meaning to the aggregation that they've done, right?
Yeah.
And it can be any method. It can be DeepSeek, or it can be ChatGPT, or it can be anything else. But the central problem of how humans make meaning by manipulating symbols, and the ontology that you mentioned, where there is also a deep-seated understanding which is shared, which is the process of sadharanikaran, and then you get into Natyashastra theory of Sahridyata, all of that. So the whole process of actually meaning making.
I want to wonder. I think this. We thought we should. What Srinivas ji said. We should have distinction between 3 things. There is a meaning of sentence, and below that, I would and so. And there is a meanings created by multiple sentences in a discourse.
Okay.
Vyākaraṇa and Nyāya limits itself to meaning of a sentence. And Mīmāmsa and Sahitya goes to, and Natya Shastra and all of that will go to meaning below that. There are models of understanding created by multiple sentences. One of them he mentioned, did not name, which is the Shadalinga.
Shat Tatparya Nirnayaka Pramanas.
Yes, Pramanas. That is another Mīmāmsa tool, which is to understand a passage or a book or a chapter. There are 6 things you have to look for to summarize it, basically, which are there in Nyaya. That is again a topic very useful in AI, I think, which is more useful in ChatGPT kind of, in LLM kind of environment where summary etc. is required. Take inspiration from them. I was getting more into within the sentence right now. Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, of course. You had clarified that as well. And we can explore both in coming conversations. But the utility that we're talking about, the practical application where we began, I'm just rounding it off given the time, that there is a deep application of Indian knowledge systems, of course, at a paradigmatic level, because it has a compact of truth claim with the methods of establishing it. And those methods are more diverse, and they encompass more ways of human knowing and human being than what is used in sciences today. And therefore, there is a paradigm claim itself. And when you hone in on computer sciences, AI, and LLMs in this context, there are specific elements of Indian knowledge systems that come into the foreground, which is Nyaya, Vaiśeṣika, Vyākaraṇa, and Mīmāmsa. And each of that has its own theory of meaning making. Some comes with the idea of linking word to word and the meaning situated at the word level. Some of it is at the sentence level. Some of it is at the context level. But all of them are complementary in Srinivas's words. And all of them have a way to actually fix the void that we see in the current generation LLMs, which are only trained and which are modeled on one way of knowing, which is looking at the available corpus of words and trying to aggregate all of it. And there is, like you said, there is no scope for either memory or symbolic manipulation at this stage. And that's the practical application that you're working on and that IKS can fill. Will that be a fair summary?
Yeah. I would say there are symbolic attempts going on outside of IKS, a lot of them right now. Because But what we have that they don't have is that we have a theory of Shabdabodha. we have a very
an ontological core.
comprehension.
Yeah.
How does humans comprehend? We have a very extensive theory, which I don't think there is a counterpart in the West.
Yeah. Srinivas, got a final comments to you with this summary and maybe a context for what can emerge in the next conversation as well. One, of course, we'll get into Nikhilesh's model a little bit in depth in the next conversation. But from your perspective, looking at computer science and application, what Nikhilesh said, any reflections to close us off?
I would definitely, I think I have mapped some of the concepts from the Shastra, whether it could be Nyaya or Mimamsa, where we can at least say that, I can identify these to be parallels of some of the approaches that are out there, that are yet, many products have been built based on those approaches. But the only thing that we can actually explore is the Shastric methodologies, whether they can enhance these approaches. A very sincere effort, I think, has to be made, and we should be pragmatic, and we should be even say, ready to accept that if this is not, this has been achieved. This approach, even though you bring in the Shastric perspective, but this has been achieved to its zenith. We should be, ready to accept. But at the same time, we should even explore and exploit this opportunity to even create certain pathways to introduce technology to the Shastric students and Shastra to the technology students. So this is more one of the most, I think, the essential contribution that we have to make.
Yeah, if the future is going to be the human-machine partnership, then you need a knowledge system that can realize the full potential of the human and also supply that kind of moral reasoning to the machine. Amrit, your thoughts? Any reflections on this?
Then just looking forward to diving deeper into this and actually understanding. Maybe in the next one, of course, Nikhilesh ji, I'll also love to understand. You mentioned that you've developed a particular language also. What is the nature of that language? Whether it's closer to assembly, whether it's closer to a programming language, those kind of things. I'd love to understand going forward.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. So we will round it off. Of course, we will make sure that there is a summary of this, and there are short clips to make sure contextualized. And also, the reason we are doing this is not to claim a perch, but it is to disambiguate and clarify and crystallize the application of Indian knowledge systems, with the goal of inspiring students, inspiring young minds to take this up. This intersection of Shastra, technology, is the blueprint for the kind of dharmic futures that we need. So we will explore this further in the next conversation. Thank you so much, Nikhilesh ji, for your time. Mahadaya, thank you so much. Amrit, thanks.
Namaste.